So I'm here to talk about why Build for India. How many of you have heard of this thing called the Internet Trends Report, something that comes out every year from Mary Merkel? Only one? Okay. I would strongly encourage all of you to have a look at that. It's an amazing report that comes out every year. A lot of CIOs, CTOs, and big brands eagerly look out for it just to see what consumers are doing year on year over the internet. So a couple of years back, it was primarily US focused. Last year, so there was a big focus on US. There was one section on China and a couple of slides on India. And this year, there was a complete section only dedicated to what's happening in India. And I have a couple of slides to try and sell the whole case of why you guys should start building for India. The first one, I think there has been no better time to be living in India right now, right? India is growing at the fastest pace. So the year-on-year growth for India was at about 6.8, which is where we're actually beating China in terms of growing at the pace at which we are growing. And if you are a technologist building for the web using the internet, that's even great because the internet growth in India is amazing. In 2014, we had about 233 million users. We were like ranked third in the world. And in 2016, we are about 462 million users, which is, we're at number 2 now. So we beat US, and we're very close to beating China right now. So we're kind of doubling in the next 2 years or so. And so now that we're adding users to the internet, but also the kind of data consumption that people have been using has actually shot up. So this is a graph of how data has been consumed by different users across India. And you'll see that it has been sort of stagnant for a couple of months. And then suddenly in the last year or so, it has shot up. And we call it the Jio effect, right? So once Jio has come, you can actually see that 9x growth that has happened up on data consumption. And what's also interesting is, so yes, we know that India people are very sensitive to data. They are very careful about how much of data is being used. But trends are changing now. So 2 apps, Gaana.com and even Hotstar, which are sort of high data consuming applications, they are seeing significant traction happening. So they're seeing 2x growth, 3x growth happening. So what's great in India is a huge amount of internet people are coming online and they are consuming data. So we have about 100 million people getting added every year. So it happened last year, it's happening again this year, right? And who are these new people? Who are these new people who are coming on the internet? Let's kind of get a good profile about them. So for one, they are the millennials and the centennials. So millennials are the people who are sort of born 1985 onwards. They are sort of now the biggest consumer segment. They're making a lot of purchases. And they kind of constitute most of the biggest workforce that's there in India. And a lot of brands, companies are very eager to understand, who these millennials are, how do they behave, how they interact. A lot of research work is happening over them. And brands are trying to adapt to them because they are the biggest consumer base. What's interesting is the next generation, the centennials, who kind of born around 2000 on, they are actually getting into the consumer space right now. So they're going to be adults in the next couple of years. And probably in some of the applications, they're already your users. And what's different for centennials is these are probably the very first generation who are born with internet being a part of their life. So from the day they were born, they have been experiencing the internet. They have been seeing YouTube videos. The moms have been giving them breakfast and lunch and dinner, making them watch YouTube videos. They have learned nursery rhymes watching YouTube, right? They have learned to swipe on mobiles and tablets even before they have learned to walk. So that's a completely different segment. And that's a very interesting space of how these people are going to be interacting with the internet. The next people who are coming online in India are the people from the villages, the small towns, and the tier 2 cities. So these are the people who are like getting their smartphone, the very first smartphone, they're getting experience of the internet, and they're being fascinated by it. And what's common between both of them is their very first experience of the internet is on a mobile device. Very different from what was during my generation. I mean, for me, the first time I got into the internet was on a 512 kbps modem, dial-up karo, and you open a browser, you go to yahoo.com. That even Google wasn't there at the point of time. But today's generation experiences the internet for the first time on mobile. And they spend a lot of time on mobile. What's also very interesting is everybody has a mobile number. they may or may not have an email, and they actually do not use an email very often because they have messaging apps to take care of. And that's also one of the very interesting facts. So, there was a time when me and my friends were debating of what's making WhatsApp so popular. WhatsApp is like the #1 app all across. What is it so popular about WhatsApp? Would any of you guys take a shot at it? What makes it so different? I mean, at the initial stages, when WhatsApp just came into the market, they had some one feature that made it different from every other app that was there at that point of time. If anybody had to take a guess, what do you think it was? Sorry? Exactly. So I think WhatsApp was one of the very first applications that did not require you to have an email or a password. Even today, I do not have a WhatsApp password. Just a phone. I put in my phone number, get an OTP, I'm on, immediate, up and running. So there was this one single thing which, it took me a while to figure out that these guys had implemented that years back. And that's what makes it different. And I think that's something we should also start doing. Why have an email? Why do a forgot password and all of that? You have a mobile phone, you have OTP, go and build applications on top of that. So those are the things. A couple of interesting quirks. I think something that even Sanjeev touched upon earlier. So about 33% of smartphone users in India run out of storage every day. So you're every day sort of deleting your good morning messages from WhatsApp, your quotes and your videos and all of that. And then next day you wait for it to again get loaded again. So 33% of your smartphone users are running out of storage every single day. About 50% of the Indian users are at 2G speeds. Your phone still says probably 4G volt, but you're experiencing it on 2G. Yeah, that's again a fact that is there, and we have to take that into account. And the cost of running an app. So obviously a lot of kind of echoing the same points that was already mentioned before. You may build a free app, but it actually can cost anywhere between 100 rupees or more for them to download the app and experience it, and people might be sensitive towards that. So these are some of the high-level kind of personas and guidelines that a person is there. And the second thing I want to touch upon is the diversity that's available in India. So I'm sure everybody knows India is a very diverse country culturally and all of that. But also the interesting thing is that technology landscape is diverse. I think India is one of the very few countries where it probably has the most number of mobile manufacturers. The kind of mobile devices that you have from different operating systems, not operating systems, from different manufacturers to different screen sizes, to different combination of screen sizes versus battery life versus the quad-core processors. That is the biggest that's available in India. It's nowhere in other country you'll find that kind of a fragmentation of devices that's there. The second thing is the connection speeds. So India is one of the very few places where you can find anybody from 2G to 3G to 4G all being consumers of your app, right? And you need to start building applications for them. And finally is the diversity that actually comes in as a part of demographics. So in terms of the dialect, in terms of even consumer behavior. So I think India as a single country offers all of this. And what we keep telling to a lot of our clients in the US and others is, if you want to kind of build a mobile strategy and you want to experiment it, do it in India. If it works for you in India, it's going to work anywhere else in the world. Because there's no other country that can give you this kind of diversity across the various technological landscapes that are there. So that was there. And the next question is then, okay, fine, great. So what do I build? You could look at a couple of options. So as per the latest trends that I'm seeing, most of the Indians are spending about 45% of their time on entertainment. So that's essentially consuming on-demand videos from YouTube, from the Hotstars of the world, or listening to music when you're stuck in your traffic jams or waiting for a bus to come. So about 45% of the users are spending time on entertainment. And 34% is actually on social media and messaging apps. And only about 4 to 2% is on shopping and news. So entertainment becomes a big segment over there for us. Healthcare could be another potential area. Another interesting stat that came out was about 80% of a person's private income is probably spent towards healthcare and healthcare products. I'm not sure how true that is, but that's again from the Mary Merker's report that says that. So 80% of Indians actually spending on the healthcare because we do not have a very strong healthcare system in India. And another interesting fact was the the ratio between urban Indians and rural Indians in terms of how much of money they spend on health is actually the same. So it's not that people in rural India are not spending on healthcare, but on urban they are not. So healthcare is another interesting space that you can look at. Third, and another more interesting is the self-coaching area. So we had about 250 million children get onto the education system in India in 1 year alone. Again, that was #1 all over the world. So we have the maximum number of children getting onto the education system. And I think there is a tendency and a trend to always augment that using tuitions and additional coaching and stuff like that. Previously, we would go to coaching classes, we would have tutors coming at home. Now that is changing. People want on-demand coaching. And a lot of apps that are focusing on that area are doing very, very well. So on-demand, self-paced coaching is an area that you can look at. And finally, I think goes without saying, is India has a huge unorganized sector, and anything that you can do to try and bring some sort of an organization thing into space and sort of cut the middleman and take it from the unorganized sector directly to the end consumers, that's an interesting space to build applications on. So that's an area where you can start building apps. And what kind of architecture and design patterns that you would want to use when you're building applications? So any app that you build has two primary contents, right? One is the content and the data. So, every app has to have some data on it. The second is the user experience. So any app that you build can be broken down into these two aspects. And what we strongly encourage you is to decouple them from each other. Do not build an application where both of them are together as a monolith. Now, as a startup, or maybe you want to do something very quickly, you try and find an open source tool like Magento or Drupal or some other application, go and build out an application there. It becomes a problem to scale it up later. So try and focus on being decoupled. And if you kind of dig deeper into this layer, it could look something like this. So you have a bottom layer where all your data is taking place. So you have data stored in databases, you're probably aggregating your data from different sources, or you're in fact even using machine learning to actually build up that particular data. And that data is funneled up to the user using web services or microservices. So microservices as a concept is established pattern. So you would have microservices on Silicon app. And then when you move on to the experience layer, you would have an orchestration layer, which is probably built on Node, where you're kind of orchestrating this data from the microservices, massaging it together, and then feeding it up to your end client-side app, which could be a web app, it could be a native app. So that's essentially how we would strongly recommend that you build your applications. The primary reason is because it allows you to swap each of these layers as and when required. So for tomorrow, you have a new technology coming in for the data layer, or you're switching your engine for machine learning from one to the other. You can just do that without having to impact your presentation layer on the top. Or the very fact is your presentation layer, when you're building it on, say, any of the JavaScript frameworks, right? You're building it on Angular or React. Every 6 months, every 1 year, there's a new framework that's coming in that's doing a much better job than the previous one, and you want to switch. So you can very easily switch without having to impact the rest of the application. So try and build your applications in a decoupled way. It's a very important thing. The second thing is have a true mobile strategy. So we keep talking about mobile first, and then it just stops over there. And then you go to build your application. Oh, I have a desktop app, I have a mobile app, and I have these two different versions of app, and it just goes divergent all the way from there. I think it's outdated now. I mean, you need to look at building applications for the mobile and treat your desktop as just another mobile device. End of the day, that is what it is. It is just another mobile device for you with a slightly larger form factor. So if you look at it from that angle, then anytime any new versions keep coming up, it's much easier to maintain, it's much easier to scale your applications from there. And the third I want to touch upon is with regard to the single page applications. So, when you're building front end for the web, you have this term called the single page application, which supposedly is supposed to be very fast, has a very good user experience, and then everybody is kind of rushing to build single page applications on Angular, on React, and all of that. It's great, there's nothing wrong with it, but then there are certain pitfalls that come along with that. To build single page applications, it sort of becomes a monolith application on the front end. So if at all you have to make every small change, you have to deploy the entire front end, which means your regression tests and all keep increasing, one. Secondly is if you want to swap it, it tends to get a little difficult. So what we kind of recommend now is this whole thing called the single page experience. As an end consumer, I don't care if your app is a single page app or not. I care about a single page experience, which means I'm transitioning across your apps, I get a nice experience out of it. And you can achieve that in something like this. So you break down your app into modules, and then you have each of these modules working as a single page app in itself. So just a rough example of how you would do it for an e-commerce site. So I would have my home page and my landing pages and my category section as one set of single page app. And then my product listings and my details is another app. Or my checkout process is another single page app in itself. And they're all connected with each other. So something like this allows me to very quickly swap even on my presentation layer. So for example, I have this entire thing built on React. Now I want to update it to Preact. Now doing the entire app is going to take me time, but I could just experiment by changing my PDP or my product listing page into a Preact page, see my performance, see how it works, and I can gradually keep scaling it up. So we have done this for a couple of projects. We gradually moved projects from Angular onto React in such a way that half my site was on Angular, half was on React. It works perfectly fine. So this is something that you should definitely try and explore. The next point I want to make is not every app needs to be native, right? So I've asked this question to a lot of people. Why do you build a native app? And these are the standard answers I keep getting every single time. One is, oh, we have to do push notifications. We want to send messages to my consumers. Okay, great, fine. The second thing that comes up is we want a good user experience. And when I dig a little deeper and ask, what do you mean by user experience? Most of the time it actually boils down to, I want smooth scrolling, which is a very small part of a user experience actually. Or we want it to work in offline mode. Or we want to take advantage of the device capability. So these are the standard points that come in every single time I ask somebody why you're building a native app. The truth is, all of that can actually be built by a progressive web app. And what exactly is a progressive web app, if I had to ask you? So many people have this, I mean, it's a new term. Many people are getting used to the concept. A lot of people think a progressive web app is a replacement for native apps or, something on those tracks. But we try to differ. I think progressive web app is a much bigger platform than a replacement for native. What we're trying to say now is it's actually a methodology for building applications for the web, for building modern applications. And this is now becoming a de facto across most of the frameworks that you're looking at. So if you're looking at using Angular, so Angular is going to come pre-built default with PWA capabilities into it. React boilerplate supports PWA into it. Or even if you're looking at Polymer. So PWA or progressive web app concepts are by default becoming a part of any web-based application. So it is not just a replacement for mobile, but look at it as a method of building modern web apps right now. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about progressive web app. So what exactly is a progressive web app? What constitutes a progressive web app? These are these 4 or 5 guidelines that are there. You can go around Google about it. I'm not going to go into the details of it. I'll just give you some high-level points. But an application that has an app shell concept where certain parts of the application which are common across a site preload first and the rest of the site loads within that, that's called an app shell. Your applications are instant loading. They have offline support using service workers. And they run at 60 frames per second, which takes care of my smooth scrolling problem. An application that can be added to the home screen and can be launched from there. And application that support push notifications. So you have all of these various parameters, then you're technically a progressive web app. And what I keep saying is progressive web app is not a new technology or not a new method of, not a new, or you don't have to like rewrite your application to convert it to a progressive web app. It can be, it's every single site that you build can be easily converted to a progressive web app just by adding a service worker and a manifest file. Just 2 additional files that you need to add in, and you're already on a way to build a progressive web app. So I sort of like to try and break it down into 2 ways. So I call this the minimal viable PWA, or the MVP again. So if you have these 5 or 6 things in your app, you're good. You're already on a journey of building a progressive web app. So have an app shell, the ability to add to home screen, and offline support. And trust me, these are done just by adding 2 simple files on an existing application. You have an existing responsive site. You can convert it to a PWA just by adding a manifest file and a service worker file that does some sort of offline caching for you. And you're already on your journey for building PWAs. And once you achieved an MVP on a PWA, then go ahead and build a full-on progressive web app. And that's where you can go and add push notifications. You can also get into something called a deeply integrated PWA, where your PWA actually works like a native app. So if you go to my app section, I search for it, or I go to uninstall, I can even uninstall my PWA. So you can do that. And another cool thing about PWAs is it's a support called background sync. What this means is, suppose I'm doing so by default now with the PWA, you can do offline browsing. So suppose you're on an e-commerce site and I'm searching through my various products. I can do it whether I'm online or offline, it'll still work. But I'm not going to be able to do transactions. Now with background sync, it also allows you to do transactions to an extent, which means I can place items to a cart, I can fill in my forms and everything, and I could still be offline. The end consumer might just get a notification saying, hey, I'm offline, but I'm still capturing all the data. And then the moment I get online, irrespective of whether my app is on or off, my data will get synced to my server from the background, and my transaction can actually get completed. So background sync is a great way to reduce your drop-off rates, especially on transactional interactions. So you definitely have a look at that. And these are some statistics that have come out from people who have implemented PWA. So Flipkart Lite were one of the first guys who implemented PWAs, and their numbers were like, they found people spending more than 3 times time on the PWA than they're spending on a normal web app. They found a 40% higher engagement rate. They said a 70% increase in conversions when it was launched from the home screen. And they also found that the data usage dropped by 3%. So that actually helps across the board. Not only is it saving your end consumer, it's also saving Flipkart a lot of money, which they're paying for data transfer and data bandwidth, right, over the internet, because the number of users that they have is so large. So anything that you do to lower data usage helps the end client also. These are some numbers from Ola that they recently launched. So Ola recently moved to a PWA, which means I don't have to install the Ola app to go and book a cab right now. And this is some high-level numbers. So their original app on Android was about 60 MB. On an iOS, it was about 100 MB. And the PWA is like 0.5 MB. You can see the vast difference that's there. And it pretty much does everything that your native app does. So like I said, many times you may not even need to have a native app. But having said that, that does not really mean that PWAs are competing with native. I'm not trying to tell you that replace your native app with the PWA. But what I'm definitely telling you is replace your responsive site with the PWA. So if you have a responsive site, adaptive site, whatever, that has to convert into a PWA because it's eventually the next generation or the next evolution of a mobile web app. So do that. The next thing I want to talk very briefly is about accelerated mobile pages. It's called AMP. It's again a product from Google. So what PWA does is it gives you a very great experience. And as you're using the app, the experience actually increases. It becomes faster and faster because your service worker is caching your data and it's actually improving performance. But one of the drawbacks of a PWA could be that the first time load can be a little slower. And that's where AMP comes and solves that for you. To AMP at a very high level consists of AMP HTML, AMP JS, and AMP Cache. So they give you a set of HTML components that you can add onto your application, add a JS file, and your application is pretty much an AMP-ready page. It gets cached on Google CDN. So when you search on Google, you get a nice AMP icon next to it. And when people are browsing through your app, they get a really super fast experience. So without having to get into deep engineering of how to improve the performance of an app, you can very quickly convert your regular website or an app into an AMP just by these 5 or 6 steps that are available over here. So AMP has been really great for content-based websites because one, it gets indexed very easily and also the experience is a lot better. But we're also seeing a lot of e-commerce sites moving on to AMP right now and experimenting with that. And what's interesting is this combination of both of them. So there's a new project started off and a lot of studies being done where you're trying to combine AMP with PWA, so which gives you the benefit of both the world, which means consumers start their journey as an AMP and then it gradually transitions into a PWA, which means you get the benefit of both the world. So instant loading immediately and a very good rich experience as you continue through the app. So that is something that you can definitely try and explore. And yes, I think it's high time that web goes beyond the screen. So most of the things that we're building is always screen dependent. Oh, are you doing for 1024? Are you doing for whatever, 1366? Are you doing for a mobile screen, tablet screen, whatnot? But the web has actually moved beyond. You can go beyond the screen. And I think these are a few things that you can look at. Web VR. VR is gaining a lot of popularity. Somehow in India, it doesn't seem to be as popular, but in the US, it is. So for example, a couple of months back, I was at South by Southwest. It's a conference that happens out of Austin. So every stall that was out there had a VR headset and had, hey, experience our product or experience our service on VR. So VR is gaining a lot of popularity over there. And thanks to Google Cardboard, the prices of VR headsets have actually dropped. So you can get a VR headset, a very nice headset for between 500 to even 1,500 on Amazon in India. It's a nice toy that people can have, put in a mobile phone, and you can have a very good experience. If you go to YouTube, there are tons and tons of 360 videos or VR-friendly videos that you can watch straight out of YouTube. You don't need to have an app. You don't need anything. So that's great. And we are actually experimenting with a couple of clients. So for example, one of the large cruises that are out of the US, so buying a cruise ticket online cruises are very expensive, and people want to make sure that this is the right experience for me. So what you're trying to do is embed this VR as part of their checkout experience. So you're browsing through a cruise, it tells you the photographs, blah, blah, blah. And there's an icon that says experience this cruise in VR mode. You click on that, it launches in web VR, and then the person can experience how the cruise looks for him or her in a web VR environment. And then they can make a more informed decision of whether you want to go with it or not. So web VR is something that you should definitely explore. The next one is this whole IoT thing. I'm sure everybody is aware of it. Everybody knows the power of it. IoT also comes with some interesting challenges. So most of these IoT devices have their own sort of ecosystem of how they work. The way they interact and the way they communicate with the internet is on a certain protocol. The way you control that device is on a certain app. So you'll end up in situations where you have an IoT-enabled light bulb, and there's a separate app for that. Or you have a thermostat, and there's a separate app for that. So if you want to try and control, you have to keep launching different apps. And try and imagine IoT in a more business environment or more in an enterprise environment like a hotel. A hotel has got security cameras, it's got a heating and cooling system, it's got lights, and you want to control that. Now switching between different control interfaces is going to be a pain. But now this whole term is being coined called the Web of Things. So where you have a single web interface which is powered by data coming in from REST API and JSON, and you have a single interface to control the various devices that are there out there. So that's the next set of things. So, and I think it's high time now we can start building or thinking about building applications that's beyond the regular screens. Look at VR, look at IoT and the web IoT. Thank you.